Well, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining Nature Kids BC this evening for another fun virtual Explorer Day. My name is Caitlin Bissett, and I'm the Provincial Network Coordinator with Nature Kids BC. I'm a third-generation European settler joining in tonight from Kamloops to Secwepemc, also known as Kamloops, on the traditional and unceded territory of the Secwepemc peoples. Before we begin, I would like to emphasize how grateful we are to live, play, and carry out our work in British Columbia, which is Indigenous land. There are over 200 First Nations communities in BC, and do you know which community is connected to the land that you are joining us on this evening? A warm welcome to all of our families and kids who are Zooming in tonight, and thank you so much for joining us. If you'd like to learn more about becoming a member with us, you can visit our website, which is naturekidsbc.ca. So now, if you haven't already, I invite you to take a moment and open up the chat and let us know where you're joining us from. If you have a question during the presentation, feel free to pop it into the chat and I'll share it with our presenter tonight. One last reminder, if you have your passport to nature, you can show it, and today's event counts as one adventure. And just a reminder, once you fill in all 6, you can mail it in to us for a prize. I'm now very excited to introduce this evening's special guest, Lauren Meads, the Executive Director of the Burrowing Owl Conservation Society of BC. And because I'm in Kamloops and a part of the grasslands, burrowing owls definitely have a special place in my heart. So the Burrowing Owl Conservation Society of BC is a nonprofit organization whose goal is to support the survival of the endangered burrowing owl in BC by leading activities such as raising owls, releasing them, creating nests, and inspiring future generations to conserve grassland habitats. So I'm excited to welcome Lauren.
Hi, Caitlin. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Burrowing Owl Conservation Society. I'm coming from near Penticton, so Caledon, in the unceded territory of the Seal peoples. And this is where I actually moved here to work on the burrowing owls. So I moved to the Okanagan. So I'm going to share my screen. I've got a presentation. Here we go. All right. All right, so tonight we're going to be talking about bringing back the burrowing owl, Athena cunicularia, and actually we're dealing with the Western burrowing owl, so it'd be Athena cunicularia hypungia, back to British Columbia. I'm Lauren Meads. I'm the Executive Director of the Burrowing Owl Conservation Society of British Columbia. I'm just getting over a cold right now, so if I have to stop to cough or if my voice sounds a little weird, that's because of that. Now you guys are probably all on mute, but I wanted to see, where do you guys think burrowing owls live? Do they live in the forests, the grasslands, or maybe by the lake? I think Caitlin already gave it away a little bit there, but the grasslands. So typically burrowing owls live in grasslands, desert areas, semi-arid deserts, which is kind of where we live right now in the Okanagan. Is especially the South Okanagan is classified as a semi-arid desert. Just a little quick quiz. It might be hard for it to do that, but which one do you think? Do you think this is the boy or the girl burrowing owl? Does anybody have any guesses? Probably not, but this is actually the boy burrowing owl, and this is the girl. So we only know that the difference between male and female during breeding season. Otherwise, they look pretty much the same. And these owls are quite small. They're only about 160 to 180 grams, about the size of a pop can with legs. Now the male gets a little bit lighter because he's out hunting all the time and trying to get food to entice a female. The female is a little bit darker because she's in the burrow, so they kind of gets bleached out. And during the breeding season too, the male has a bit more of a white eyebrow here, and he likes to flash that at the female. Okay. Here is the range for the burrowing owl. So this is a bit of North America here. So you can see Canada up here, and a lot of you guys obviously We're all in British Columbia here, some are on the coast, some are inland. I live just kind of right down here. So this is part of that Great Basin that comes down, extends into Washington, Oregon. So the owls would have been found up here. That was definitely the outer limits of it, as you can see going through the rest of Western Canada as well, and down into the States. And so the current range, so this was the historical range, the dark color, and then the lighter color is the current range, and it's actually even lower than that now. And working with people in Washington, it's even probably less than that now. So definitely getting smaller and smaller. But where do they nest within that range? You can probably guess with the name burrowing owls is they live in burrows. And like all owl species, generally owls don't make their own nests. They like to take and reconstitute nests from other animals. So like even your great horned owl will take old raven or crow nests or red-tailed hawk nests. Burrowing owls like to use holes from other burrowing mammals. Mainly in BC, it would have been from badgers. Unfortunately, badgers are also endangered, so not very many of them left. The burrows you saw underneath the badger there, those are artificial ones, so ones that we put in. They also probably historically would have been in ground squirrel burrows here, but we don't have as many, again, in those desert and grassland areas. In the prairies, it would be prairie dog colonies and sometimes some coyote dens. So owls generally, the burrowing owls like to go where there's holes already dug, but they have those long legs so they can actually do some remodeling work. Now, some of that remodeling work, these are the artificial burrows, is they like to sort of dig out the front. They also like to grab cow manure or other kinds of manure. So that's the poop of other animals, specifically like herbivorous animals. And they like to crumple it up here in the front. So they have it in the front. Sometimes they crumple it up and put it under their eggs. And so some of the reasons people thought originally why they did that was because, oh, it's smelly. So anything that maybe come in there that maybe want to harm them, so other predators, they would smell it and be like, oh, there's nothing in there. Or perhaps it was to help keep the eggs warm. But we have seen other burrows and they'll just nest right in the dirt. Really what this is, and it's really most important on the outside here, is this cow manure actually attracts insects. And especially when the young owls are coming out, they want some easy prey to eat. So like some beetles and different bugs, even some maggots and things like that will kind of be at the front. And the adults also love all those insects as well. So that's a big part of their diet. So they have 6 to 12 eggs. So it's a huge amount of young per nest, or that's called a clutch. So a lot of birds, generally a lot of owls don't have that many eggs. They'll have maybe 1 or 2 or maybe 4. So your great horned owl, which is your really large owl that you guys are probably all familiar with, that you hear calling at night, they will have maybe 1 or 2, maybe 4 young. So this is quite remarkable that they'll have 6 to 12. And this is just a little video of some of them. Just turn up your sound, you can kind of hear them. Little peeping sounds. And so you can see that some of them have hatched, but there's still some that have not hatched. You'll also see on the end there, they've got this little thing called an egg tube. So I pointed out there was that really tiny white thing on the end. So that's an egg tooth, and that helps them break out of their egg. So all birds will have that to get out of their egg. A lot of reptiles as well will use that to crack out of the egg. And you can see too, like this one's a little pinky, some are a little fluffier. So probably These ones just hatched. These ones hatched maybe like an hour or two before, but you'll see as well that all of them have hatched. So when burrowing owls lay their nests, they will lay about half of them first, and then they'll start incubating. So incubating means they're going to sit on them and keep them warm. So most birds will start incubating pretty much right away, or once they've laid them all. These guys will start incubating halfway through. They'll keep laying the rest of their nests. So when they hatch, they actually have different incubation times. So they will hatch over a couple of days. So again, you can see there that 1 day old, that one's just a fresh one coming out. Then these guys, and then the rest will come along. So that means that there'll be some difference in size of the siblings. So sometimes the oldest ones will do much better than, say, the youngest ones. If we get really tiny ones that aren't able to survive, sometimes we'll bring them in, beat them up, and we can put them back in any burrow. But you can see here, this is only 5 days old. So from 1 day to 5, this is kind of 5 to 7 days. You can see how much they've grown already, and their eyes are open. 2 weeks old, they're going to start coming out of their burrow. And about 3 weeks, you can see they're starting to get some of their adult feathers, really losing all that fluffiness. And at about 4 to 5 weeks old, this is just before they start flying, we will band them. So we put these green over black bands, and they're different letters and numbers. And the green over black band means it's specific to British Columbia. And so if they're found anywhere else, if you even see that with a camera or a big scope or something, you'll be able to identify that. These other bands go on the other leg. They're the US Fish and Wildlife bands. They're a big, long number. They're a lot harder to see, but they're put into a big database that is a sort of tri-nationally. So if they find this owl somewhere else, it will go to the government, and then the government will tell us, hey, there was this bird that was found.
Lauren,
Yes.
sorry, there's just a question in the chat. Diana's wondering, what do the owlets weigh when they're born?
Yeah, so when they're first born, they're about 7 grams. And then when they're about this age, 4 to 5 weeks, they can be 130 to almost 140 to 50 grams. So getting pretty close to adult weight. We weigh them all mostly on a jewelry scale that goes up to 250 grams. We never really get ones that are over that. And then we put them in this little cloth, and we do a burrowing owl burrito. So we wrap them up and just have their little legs free. So yeah, good question. So this is some videos from some wildlife cameras that I just got this past year. And then these are some owls that have just been banded. So you can kind of see what they're just doing, hanging out in front of the burrow. One's just sitting here, and one's standing on top of some manure. He's also stretching his legs, stretching his wing out. So that's typical of a burrowing owls, especially when they're young. They'll stretch their legs and their wings out quite a bit. They'll also lay down, which is kind of funny, in the ground. But by 6 weeks, 6 to 8 weeks, this is a full-grown burrowing owl. So they go from that 7-gram little fluff ball to this full-grown owl. And they'll still be staying close to home, but they'll be able to start hunting on their own, which is really great. So why am I talking about burrowing owls? Well, I work for an organization that's trying to bring them back because unfortunately they are endangered. So that means there's not very many of them left. Their range in Canada is British Columbia, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba. In BC and Manitoba, they've been confirmed as extirpated. So that means extinct in that area. So Manitoba is about the 1990s and BC about the 1980s. So, and Alberta and Saskatchewan, their populations have declined more than 90 to 95% from their original numbers. So probably now Saskatchewan maybe has 100, maybe Alberta, maybe about 200 individuals. So that's down from thousands. So everyone's always asked me, well, why? Reasons for decline. There are so many reasons. These are just a few of them. But one of them is loss of suitable grassland habitat. So lots of areas may have changed in the way that habitat is used, either is there development or agriculture, and even if some of it's preserved, how, is it in pieces? Is it really connected like it used to be? And again, badgers, they are also endangered in British Columbia, and they would have dug a lot of the holes. A lot of the burrowing mammals, even marmots, have been kind of pushed away from the areas that they would have dug those holes. We've got all these cities and agriculture around, and with that is a reduction in the food that the owls would eat. So in those cities and farms surrounding, people are using different poisons to get rid of rodents and insects. So those are called pesticides. And there was a really big push, a lot of people know about DDT in the 60s and 70s, and a lot of birds took a huge hit at that point, and really, like, the burrowing owls in BC did as well. Increases in aerial predators. So the burrowing owls are small and they're in the grasslands. They're very easily visible. There's an increase in red-tailed hawks do really well, great horned owls, ravens, crows. And then these are also things that have kind of moved into the grasslands that weren't there before, because we have telephone poles and fence posts. And like great horned owls, that's what they like to do, like sit and wait. Same with red-tailed hawks and stuff like that. Like, they're surveying a bit, but they also like to perch and kind of survey the area. Vehicle collisions. So a lot of the owls, when they don't have the burrows, they end up on the sides of the roads, because sometimes there's little holes that go under the roads called culverts, and they'll nest in there, and then that's kind of dangerous, because when they come out, or the young, or they might try and go hunting, they unfortunately can get hit by cars, and they're so small. And they, unlike other owls, burrowing owls are crepuscular, which means they hunt at dusk and dawn, so early morning, late evening. A lot of owls are nocturnal, but we even have some owls that are diurnal, so that means hunting during the day. So burrowing owls are kind of in the middle there. And if you're hunting at dusk and dawn and the cars can't see very well, that's be a bit of an issue. Expansion of renewable energy, which is great, but unfortunately the way it's done now does have huge impacts on the owls. So we need to kind of try and figure out how to do those a little bit better, and not just with owls, but other animals too. And severe weather events, so climate change. I was just talking to Caitlin before, like the drought can probably affect the rodents that might be available for the owls to eat. We also, in the Okanagan, we've been finding it's quite wet during sort of April and, well, more May now. And that's when the owls are nesting here. So that's not great if it's wet. They can't go out hunting as often, and it's cold for the young. And then fire. I mean, fire is not great when they're there, though fire can help restore some of the grasslands to what they were, because we do have this encroachment of trees, which again brings those predators. So lots of different reasons. But one way we can help the owls is digging artificial burrows. So we have volunteers come out, we'll dig burrows, we dig them by hand, and we put them mostly on properties where people love the owls and want to help work with the owls. This is our burrow installation, and generally in other places as well where they do burrows, they're kind of the same. Some have 2 entrances, some are maybe made with some different materials, but generally they're all kind of the same. There's these 3 bucket system here. This is the nest chamber, and this is dug down here, probably about 4 feet down. And then this is a tube that's about 10 feet long. So the owls will access this tube. This will be up at ground level. And then this goes all the way down. And then this bucket goes in here. And this is where I can access the owls through this bucket here. And when this bucket is on top, there is a lid that's ground level as well. So if you're walking out there in the grasslands, you wouldn't be able to notice where the bucket was. So so how do we get the owls to put into these artificial burrows? Well, this program started in the early 1980s. So there was a push from the provincial government in the 80s, and they brought some owls from Washington up to BC, and then we traded them bighorn sheep. So that's what used to do back in the old days. You could just move things across the border. Now it's a lot more complicated with permits. But they did that for a few years. They found the owls were doing okay there, but then they kept going back down to Washington and not coming back up here. So our president here, Mike McIntosh, he was helping with some of that, and he said, well, let's breed them here. So we've got 3 breeding facilities. So our first one is down in the Lower Mainland. We have one at the BC Wildlife Park in Kamloops. And then our newest one is in Oliver, which was built in 2011. And so between the 3 of them, we release about 60 to 100 owls a year. So the owls that are in there are either caught from the wild from Washington or Oregon, or they're descendants of them. And we've only gone like a few times to get wild ones. So we want to try and limit how many we take from the wild. And this is actually what's happening right now in our facility. I just put all of our pairs together. So in a few weeks, they should be nesting. So this is one of our female owls in our captive facility, and she's already got 2 little eggs there, and so she'll have some more soon. So as I said, the people that we work with generally have been private ranchers. So those were the ones with the big tracts of grassland. And a lot of them were up between Merritt and Kamloops. So that's the Nicola Valley. But we have also expanded now to some provincial sites and working with some conservancy groups. So the Nature Conservancy of Canada, the Nature Trust of BC. In 2010, we moved down into the South Okanagan again, and doing more work with the local bands. So the Upper Nicola Band actually has a program up there where we give them our captive bred owls and they release them. Also with the Penticton Indian Band and the South Okanagan, they have it part of their Guardian program where they monitor the owls that we've released for them. And we're hoping to get some sites federally as well later on. And you can see here's a burrow here, and there's some cattle. So cattle and burrows do fine together. The only thing is like the cattle their feet don't get wrecked or anything, contrary to what people believe. What ranchers used to believe, that holes would damage the cows. But really the cows are the ones that sort of damage our burrows, or sort of stomp on them and break stuff. And just so you know too, like this might be hard for you guys to see, but this hill up here, there's actually like a bunch of burrows here and a bunch right here, but it's hard to see them from so far away. So it's really, you can't really tell unless you have a map. So when we release them, we used to do something called hard release. So we just put them as pairs. So they're 1-year-old owls that are from the facility, like we talked about earlier. They're 1-year-old, and then we put them together as male and female. And what's really cool is like I said, remember, it's hard to tell male and female until the breeding season, but we need to kind of know who's male and female before we put them together. So when we band them with those green over black bands the year before, we actually take a couple little feathers and we send it to a place in Nelson, BC, that's called Wildlife Genetics. And they test it and they tell us which one is a boy and which one's a girl. So that's perfect. So then we can make sure we put 2 together that will mate. And so we used to put out some ones called hard release. So you just put them out in the burrow and hope they do okay. But this woman here, Amy Mitchell, did her master's on release techniques and found that the soft release caging that we can put up will actually increase the survivability of the owls by 50% and increase the amount of young that they will have as well. So it's really great. We tend to keep them on for like a couple of weeks, but we're also feeding them while they're in there. So don't worry, they're getting food. And then we put a little electric fence around it. It helps stop coyotes. But also a lot of the cattle in the area, they like to rub up against the cage and sometimes kind of knock it over. So we want to prevent them from that. I'm just going to go show you guys a release. Everyone always wants to come to a release. It's a little anticlimactic. I always tell people if they want to come and help, volunteer at one of our facilities or help us dig burrows. And if you do one of those things, then you'll get invited out when we do band the young, which I think is the most fun part. But here's a release.
Buttons 498 releasing the male.
So there you just saw me release one bird. So we basically take the male and the female, we stick them in the hole, and that's a release. After the release, so you can see this is some of the adults just hanging out in the front. Oh. Actually, sorry, that was a young one, and he was just begging for food, but he could see our wildlife camera. Again, this is some of these new videos, so you guys are the first people to see them, so I thought I'd just show because they're so funny. Guess we'll see it again. There it goes. So I was talking about supplemental feeding. Excuse me, sorry. So when we have the soft release cage up, we have to give them food because it's hard for them to catch food. Up at the top here, these gray ones here, these are like deer mice and pocket gophers and meadow voles. This is what the owls generally in this area would eat. And they're going to try and grab as many as they can, especially when they're trying to attract a female. So this is usually when we're checking the burrows in the spring. So in April, we'll see this quite a lot. So we're seeing all these different rodents in there to entice a female. What we do feed is we feed lab mice, or they look like lab mice, but they're raised for excuse me, reptiles and zoos and birds of prey. So we purchased these from reputable breeders. We used to feed also sometimes day-old chicks, which is an offshoot of the poultry industry. Unfortunately, we can't get them anymore due to the bird flu. So now we only get the mice. The mice used to cost about $1 each, and the chicks were like 3 cents. But now the mice have gone up to about $1.40 each. So sorry. It's starting to become quite expensive. So, and just so you know, like each bird each day needs 2 prey items. So 2 mice a day. So if you see how many we release, we can release 60 to 100 owls. The owls of the facility, we usually have 5 to 10 pairs each, and they each need 2, and then they have young, and then the owls out in the field too. We'll still give them some food just to supplement because they are new owls out there. So it adds up pretty quick. So for you kids, we don't have any pellets right now to do it, but sometimes you can get them online. Or I can send some out to you guys. When they eat those rodents, they swallow everything. Sometimes they can, like for the young, they'll kind of rip off pieces and give that, but they're eating all the fur, feathers, bones, whatever. And then they have this area called the proventriculus. I'm really sorry, everyone. I'm just getting over a cold. So, and what it does is like all the good nutrients go in, and then this is all packaged. So any hair, bones, or feathers, whatever, anything that's not digestible will be coughed out, and that's your pellets. So the burrowing owl ones are quite small. Great horned owl ones pretty big. And I sometimes do this with the classes I have. So you can kind of go through the pellets, and generally you can find that one species all represented in that pellet. So you might have a rodent or a mole or a shrew or a bird. And it's kind of nice too, because when I'm supplement feeding, if they cast off a pellet that's kind of white, I'm like, okay, it's the food we're giving them. If it's gray, or there's sometimes even the insects, like the hard casing on the insects will be coming out as well. So I'm like, okay, great. They're eating wild food now, and they're eating wild insects. So that's really great. So if the burrowing owls, if the ones we just released if they just stayed here, I think we would have a pretty viable population. But of course, the burrowing owls in Canada and the northern United States, they're actually migratory. So this is where we release them here. This is the Nicola Valley and then the South Okanagan approximately. And these are just sightings over the years. So this is like people have just sighted these green over black bands, or maybe they've had this bird in hand, or maybe it passed away and they gave us these bands back. So we can kind of see generally that the ones we release, they're kind of heading down coast. And this is the thing, like they're migrating. They leave in about October, November, and then they start coming back up to BC in late March, April. And we do get some returning, but we don't get enough coming back that we would say like, okay, we can stop releasing them now. So what we need to do now is try to work with people along their migration route to say like, are these the typical ways that they're going? Is there a way that we can protect some of those areas that they are going to? What's really cool is at our breeding facilities, we've got the largest burrowing owl breeding in the world. So I've got our education owl. I've also got a few other owls that we can do some testing of our transmitters. The reason why I use our education owl is because he likes to sort of pick at things. He's pretty good about testing things out. But these are the new transmitters. They've really come a long way. They are GPS accurate now. And this is actually a little solar panel on the back. So the things that make it really heavy are batteries. So having a solar panel is great because it makes it a bit lighter. The only issue is that the owls go underground a lot. So there's times when we don't get signals, but then when they come back out and it's light, it'll charge right up. But really the great thing about this project is working with the community, working with volunteers, landowners, the Native community, businesses. It's just lots of great volunteers. We do have a board of directors, but I'm the only full-time staff. And then I have 2 seasonal staff that I can hire. And so a really small group and lots of great people helping the owls. We do have this great diorama that I take to some schools and different events. And it shows kind of what the burrow would look like and where the entrance, kind of just like a mock burrow there, so people can really see what it's about. Again, people dissecting pellets. We have groups coming out to help us do the setup before the release as well, so setting up soft release cages. I didn't bring him here tonight, but we do have an education burrowing owl, and this is Pluto. And sometimes he's a little grumpy and doesn't want to come out. But there he is. He's a little puffed up because it was a bit cold this week. He's going to be 9 this May. So typically burrowing owls, again, this is another issue for them, is they live 4 to 6 years in the wild. In captivity, maybe 11. So they're not a very long-lived owl, and that's not great too with their migration, if they could only come back maybe once or twice. So there he is. So he's getting to be an old man. So thanks everybody. Just want to thank all of our different partners, especially the Burrowing Owl Winery. They've been involved with the Burrowing Owl program since the 90s when it started. That's when they started. They pretty much hopped on board, and we're digging burrows, and the last 15 years have been great donors. So all of the tasting fees come directly to us, and that really helps with our running of our facilities. This is our website, so burrowingowlbc.org. Generally, when you type in Burrowing Owls BC, you get the winery first, but then you can get down to us. We also have a Facebook page and an Instagram page as well that you can follow. And if you have any questions, we've got our email on there, or you can get Caitlin to contact me. So yeah, so that's it, everybody. And thank you so much for your patience. Sorry that I had a bit of a coughing session there. So
Thanks, Lauren. That was great. There were a few questions. One of the participants was wondering why they have bands on their legs.
So all birds, generally, if they're in these programs, you need to put bands on their legs, and that's to keep track of them. So the green over black band is specific to BC. So there's different colored bands across North America for the burrowing owls. And then we have to put the US Fish and Wildlife band on there. So for releasing birds, they need to have that on there because, you know, you can see them. They look pretty much the same. So it's the best way to keep track of them.
Awesome. And then how deep are the burrows when you install them?
So about 4 feet deep. So you want to make sure it's nice and dark in there. And those tunnels are about 10 feet long. So about 2 meters. And then probably like 1 meter and a bit deep.
Awesome. Another question. Someone was wondering, how old were you when you realized that you wanted to work with burrowing owls?
Oh, I don't know. I've always wanted to work with animals from when I was a little kid. I thought, oh, I'll have to be a vet, right? Because that's what you think when you want to work with animals. But I ended up going to school and just doing biology. And I also wanted to be a zookeeper. So I did that for a little bit. And I worked with a lot of like exotic cats, and that's what I wanted to do. But then I actually worked with the spotted owls on the coast. And I was like, oh yeah, birds are pretty cool. And then I got to meet the people that doing the burrowing owls. And that was back in, I think I met them in 2007. And then I started volunteering with them in 2008. And then 2009, I started working with them. So, and yeah, I've just loved them ever since. So I guess I was in my 20s then. So it's been a while, early 20s. So yeah.
That's great. And this question, I think the person knows some facts about burrowing owls because they're wondering, do burrowing owls hiss like rattlesnakes within their burrows to scare off predators?
They do.
Yeah.
I should.
It's a cool fact.
Yeah, we have it on our Instagram. One of our posts has that. They're hissing. And so they only do that when they're young. So when they're adults, they don't really do that. But yeah, if you open a burrow and you've got those young owls in there, they will start hissing and it sounds just like a rattlesnake. So you have to be careful. Yeah.
That's great. And then last question was, what time of day do you feed the owls? Like, I guess after you release them and you have to return, is there a certain time of day?
No. The nice thing about burrowing owls too is they like to food cache. So they'll kind of like, they'll take their food and then they'll just put it in their burrow and then they can leave it for later. So it's almost like us having our fridge. So a lot of owls like need to eat it like right away, but they can store a whole bunch. So that's what's great about these guys too. They're really good in a captive setting, and for releasing in artificial burrows, they're very adaptable in that way. That's why it's so frustrating that we're like, why haven't they come? They're so easy in so many ways. But yeah, you can feed them anytime that suits you. But probably the best time to observe their behavior is kind of dusk and dawn, because usually during the day they're kind of hang around near their burrow, and then at night it's a bit hard to see them. So yeah,
that's great. Awesome. Well, thank you again, Lauren, for this excellent presentation and for teaching us all about burrowing owls. Everyone here tonight, stay tuned because next week we'll be sending out an email to everyone that registered with the recording, and we also have some fun burrowing owl resources to share with you. So thanks again, Lauren, and thanks again for everyone for joining us tonight, and have a good night.
Yeah, on our website too, there's teacher resources.
Oh,
so there's
great.
some other fun things. You don't have to have it for your school, but other things that you guys can do with burrowing owl stuff. So thanks very much, everyone.
Awesome.
Okay.
Have a good night.